step into the reality of Ukraine right now, and it's incredibly stark. We're talking about these massive attacks hitting cities almost every single night.
Yeah, it's relentless.
Yeah.
A truly devastating human toll. Not just the casualties you see immediately, but the psychological weight of it all.
It's a brutal new normal.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the sources you shared, they paint a vivid picture of just how much the scale and, the frequency of these attacks, particularly the aerial ones, have escalated recently.
Absolutely. So our mission for this deep dive is to, well, cut through the noise and really try to understand what's happening on the ground.
Right.
We're using your stack of sources, recent news reports, detailed humanitarian, economic assessments, even some online discussions to unpack these latest escalations.
Look at the impact on people, on infrastructure.
Exactly, and see how the war itself is changing, and importantly, explore the different perspectives on the international response that show up in this material.
Right. We're drawing from places like NPR, Kyiv Independent for the News, Relief Web, CARE for the humanitarian side, Kyiv School of Economics for those hard numbers on damage.
And even pulling in viewpoints from like a Reddit thread to get a sense of some of the public chatter around it.
Yeah, it gives a bit of that ground level feel sometimes.
Our goal is to synthesize all this, give you a clear picture of the current situation, the sheer scale of destruction, how tactics are evolving, and those varied global viewpoints, all strictly based on what's in these sources.
Okay, let's dive in.
So first off, the scale of these recent Russian attacks. The sources really hammer this home.
They do. Terms like massive, large scale, they're used repeatedly for these drone and missile strikes. And one detail that really stands out is how long they often last.
How long are we talking?
Sometimes over 9 hours.
Okay.
Overnight, according to NPR and the Kyiv Independent.
9 hours. Just
Yeah.
imagine that, night after night, and the volume of ordnance.
It's staggering. Your sources cite specifics. June 6th, reports mentioned over 400 drones and more than 40 missiles in just one wave.
400 drones.
And then more recently, June 17th, it was reportedly 280 drones and 2 Kinzhal ballistic missiles. Those are hypersonic and mostly at Kyiv, it seems.
And the human cost that comes with that kind of barrage?
It's reflected in just grim casualty figures across Ukraine. The sources detail specific tragic outcomes. Reports of at least 15 killed, dozens injured in one Kyiv strike.
Just one strike.
Yeah. Another attack on June 17th, again in Kyiv, reportedly killed 14 and injured 114, and yet another saw 9 killed and 70 injured, also in the capital.
But it's not just Kyiv taking the hits, is it?
Not at all. The destruction, the casualties, they're widespread. Sources report strikes damaging, I think, 18 apartment buildings and 13 private homes in Kharkiv.
Just devastating for those families.
And a strike in Odessa killed 1, injured 17, including a pregnant woman and a child. Then there was that horrific attack in Kryvyi.
I saw reports on that one.
Killed 14 people, injured over 50. And just heartbreakingly, 6 children were among the dead.
Oh, that's awful.
Other cities mentioned include Sumy, with 34 killed reported in one instance, and Dubropilya in Donetsk, hit multiple times. One attack there, at least 5 dead, 15 injured. Another killed at least 11.
So the overall picture.
Well, one source covering the human cost tallies it up. May alone saw 159 civilians killed, nearly 900 wounded. April was apparently even deadlier. 209 killed, 1,146 injured.
These aren't just abstract numbers. It feels like a deliberate strategy targeting civilians.
The sources certainly point towards attacks hitting civilian centers relentlessly.
Yeah.
And beyond that immediate physical harm, they highlight the immense psychological toll.
How so?
Reports describe Kyiv residents finding the whole experience surreal, just living in constant fear, isolation. That horrible buzz of the drones overhead is causing widespread panic, a daily terror.
You can only imagine.
And the sources point to untreated psychological trauma becoming what one calls a silent epidemic in these communities that are shelled over and over. It's this hidden crisis alongside the visible destruction.
And amidst all this, trying to get help to people is dangerous too.
Extremely. What's striking from the relief web source specifically is how compromised humanitarian aid delivery is. They note aid access faced at least 109 incidents since January.
Incidents meaning?
Including direct attacks on aid operations and personnel. In just 2 months, 2 humanitarian workers were killed, 16 injured just trying to help civilians.
That's unbelievable.
And rescue workers, the first responders rushing to attack sites, they've also become casualties, like the 3 killed, 14 injured in Kyiv on June 6th. It really underscores the incredible courage it takes for aid workers to keep going.
Facing daily threats like that, it's remarkable. Now, this immense human suffering is paired with just unbelievable physical destruction. Let's turn to the infrastructure damage. The sources paint a staggering picture here.
They really do. That Kyiv School of Economics report gives us a sobering figure. As of January 2024, the total estimated damage to Ukraine's physical infrastructure is over $157 billion.
Over $157 billion. Specifically, $157.2 billion, the report says.
$157.2 billion. It's almost impossible to really grasp that scale. And the report breaks down where that damage is concentrated. It shows a clear pattern.
Which is?
Residential buildings, they account for the largest share, a staggering 37.5% or $58.9 billion.
Wow.
That's over 170,000 buildings damaged or destroyed, nearly 9% of Ukraine's total housing stock.
Yeah.
It really highlights the targeting of civilian life, of shelter itself.
Right. Hitting people where they live. What else?
Infrastructure overall, including transport, makes up about 23%, $36.8 billion. And assets of enterprises, industry, at least $13.1 billion. We're talking hundreds of large and medium businesses, plus tens of thousands of small ones, damaged or destroyed.
So it's not just homes, it's crippling the economy's ability to function, to rebuild.
Precisely. Agriculture has also taken a big hit, $10.3 billion in damages, mostly damaged machinery, destroyed or stolen products. And the energy sector, a really consistent target of Russian strikes, shows $9.0 billion in damages.
And the energy sector losses are critical, right? They affect daily life across the whole country.
Absolutely. The report mentions significant damage to electricity generation, transmission, coal power plants, combined heat and power plants, hydroelectric plants.
The Kakhovka Dam destruction, that's part of this too.
Yes, that alone caused estimated damages of $586 million across various sectors, according to the report. Plus, fuel storage facilities, oil refineries have been targeted too, aiming to disrupt power and logistics.
And then there are the losses you can't easily put a price tag on, cultural sites.
A huge point in the sources. At least 1,804 cultural facilities, 348 religious buildings damaged or destroyed. Painful examples like the Holy Dormitions, Sviatohorsk Lavra, a UNESCO site, the Museum of Hrihori Skovoroda, the Mariupol Drama Theater.
And the report makes that crucial point. You can tally the cost of the bricks and mortar, but the historical, the cultural significance, that's irreplaceable.
Exactly, especially when access to assess the full damage is limited. Transport infrastructure also shows extensive damaged roads, bridges, railways, municipal transport.
I read something about public transport being hit hard.
Yeah, the report notes a shocking 60-70% loss in public transport in Donetsk and Luhansk regions, crippling mobility for people there. Ports have also suffered damage, impacting trade.
What about basic utilities? Water, heat?
Also targeted. $4.5 billion in damages reported to heat supply, water, sewage, waste management, hundreds of boiler houses, water treatment plants, pumping stations hit. Basic necessities for millions.
Even digital infrastructure.
Yep. Estimated damages of $510 million to telecom operators. Many internet networks, mobile base stations out of service, particularly in the east and south. Hinders communication, information access.
And the financial sector?
Not immune either.
Yep.
$21 million in residual value of lost bank property reported. Banks closed about 1,500 branches. That's 20% of the total. And sources mention banks being robbed in occupied territories.
It's just systematic. This list from the sources, it shows an effort to dismantle seemingly every facet of Ukrainian society and infrastructure.
And this immense destruction, it's intrinsically linked to how the war's being fought now. The sources reveal a significant evolution in tactics, in technology, particularly around drones.
Yes, the drone war aspect really comes through in the material. Russia's strategy increasingly relies on those Iranian-made Shahed drones, right? Called Geran by Russia.
Definitely. They're a key component of strikes, especially targeting Ukraine's energy grid, according to the sources.
And the tactics are designed to be effective against defenses.
That's the idea. Launching hundreds simultaneously from different directions, trying to just overwhelm air defenses. Sources note they even use some as decoys, basically.
Decoys to waste Ukrainian missiles.
Exactly. Make them expend precious, expensive ammunition. Some drones also fly quite high, apparently over 5 kilometers, making them harder to hit with certain systems, like firearms or some surface-to-air missiles.
And it's partly about cost, isn't it?
A huge factor. Sources estimate these Shaheeds at maybe $20,000 each. Compare that to the interceptor missiles Ukraine uses, maybe $400,000 to $1.2 million per missile.
That's an incredible asymmetry.
It is. And the drones are reportedly reliably accurate, effective at hitting critical nodes, and they help supplement Russia's own dwindling missile stocks. It's a clear use of low-cost tech for high-impact strikes.
Meanwhile, Ukraine isn't just defending. The sources talk about their adaptation, their innovation with drones, too.
Remarkable adaptation, yes. The sources describe things like Operation Spiderweb.
What's that?
It involves Ukrainian drone strikes deep inside Russian territory, targeting air bases, aircraft.
How successful has that been?
Well, sources mention Ukraine claiming hits on 41 planes, including strategic bombers. Russia, predictably, disputes the full extent but acknowledges some damage. This operation apparently involves smuggling drones into Russia over months.
Smuggling them in, that's quite an operation.
It is, and what it demonstrates, as the sources highlight, is Ukraine's ability to conduct these low-cost precision strikes deep inside enemy territory. That capability, that's becoming more accessible globally now.
It's what one source calls the era of precise mass in warfare.
Exactly. There's even mention of potential AI use for autonomous drone operations if comms are lost. Thinking ahead.
But despite this innovation, air defense is still a massive challenge for Ukraine.
A persistent one, yes. They use various methods, fighters, ground-based missiles around cities, radar guns, machine gun positions, but the sheer volume of incoming drones, missiles, it can still overwhelm them.
And that cost disparity we mentioned plays into it constantly.
Hugely. Trying to shoot down swarms of cheap drones with expensive missiles is just economically draining. Ammunition depletes. Sources suggest Ukraine needs thousands of these high-flying drone hunters monthly.
Thousands monthly, that's a huge need.
And adding to that challenge, one source reported the White House diverting 20,000 anti-drone missiles intended for Ukraine to allies in the Middle East. A decision the material suggests would certainly impact Ukraine's defense capabilities.
Which brings us to the broader geopolitical context discussed in your sources. The material, including comments from that Reddit thread and news reports, it presents some very different takes on U.S. leadership and its role here.
Very different, yes. The sources show a real spectrum. Some commentators directly link global instability, the conflict's path, to U.S. leadership decisions. One Reddit comment, and I'm quoting directly from the source material here, suggests, when America selects an incompetent leader, the whole world burns. Strong words. Very. Another commenter, analyzing different administrations, claims Trump is, quote, removing the veil of liberal world order and showing America's world order where might makes right, contrasting that with a democratic approach.
And another perspective.
One even posits that perceived actions by the Biden administration weakened institutions, leading to what they see as Trump being the logical conclusion. Again, these are views expressed within the source material we reviewed.
Okay, but conversely, there are other voices in the same sources offering a different view.
Yes, particularly from what's presented as a Ukrainian perspective in that Reddit thread. One commenter argues Biden was way better, citing his tough stance on Putin and the significant aid provided. They express gratitude for that support.
So some see Biden's approach as stronger.
And some sources presenting that viewpoint see Trump as potentially wilker, maybe leading to more chaos globally. So the sources clearly capture this divergence of opinion on the U.S. role and impact.
And often linking it directly to the conflict. The material also reports on specific events tied to U.S. policy shifts.
Right. There are reports in the sources linking a suspension of U.S. intelligence sharing and military aid to an increase in Russian missile and drone strikes. A direct correlation suggested there.
An increase. Wow. And what about the current administration's approach, according to the sources?
Well, reports indicate the Trump administration is pursuing a negotiated peaceful settlement and potentially looking to cut aid. The U.S. Defense Secretary is quoted in one source saying the administration takes a very different view of the conflict, prioritizing a settlement over more military aid.
The sources also mentioned Trump leaving the G7 summit early, ahead of an expected meeting with Zelensky.
Yes, that's reported.
Yeah.
And they recall his previous pledge to end the war in 24 hours, noting that diplomatic efforts reportedly yielded no results so far.
There was also a quote from someone.
Yeah, one source includes a quote from a retired police officer expressing frustration with what they perceived as Trump's indecisiveness towards Russia. So it's clear from these sources, perspectives on U.S. policy are varied, complex, and seen as having real consequences on the ground.
And beyond the U.S. focus, the sources briefly touch on other geopolitical points.
Just briefly, yeah. Things like the potential for Europe to emerge as a stronger global power, some predictions of economic shock from potential conflicts involving Iran, the ongoing debate about how effective sanctions really are, and expanded China-Russia ties. It's a complex global picture the sources allude to.
And this conflict itself, its implications seem to go way beyond Ukraine's borders, particularly for the future of warfare.
Absolutely. The sources frequently describe Ukraine as a modern test bed, like the Spanish Civil War was historically. especially for the mass use of these inexpensive drones.
And not just for Russia and Ukraine.
No. Iran, too, is seen as using this conflict to test and showcase its drone technology, according to the Washington Institute source.
Which points to a future of warfare characterized by
what the sources call precise mass. The ability for more actors, states, even non-state groups, to conduct numerous low-cost, precise strikes. That poses a huge challenge for traditional, very expensive defensive systems.
So it forces a rethink of defense.
It necessitates it, the sources imply. Things like hardening critical targets, making systems more resilient by dispersing assets, and developing cheaper countermeasures like directed energy weapons, maybe to handle swarms of cheap drones.
There was also a pretty stark perspective on nuclear weapons mentioned.
Yeah, one source included the viewpoint that this conflict has been the best advertisement for nuclear weapons ever, suggesting it could influence proliferation decisions for states seeking that ultimate deterrent against aggression. It's a sobering thought from the material about the conflict's potential long-term impact.
It really is. So, okay, let's pull this together. What these sources tell us is, well, first, the devastating scale of recent attacks, the immense human cost, including that hidden crisis of psychological trauma.
Right. Then there's the staggering infrastructure damage, over $157 billion detailed in the reports, highlighting what looks like a systematic effort to cripple the country.
And we've explored how the conflict is rapidly evolving, especially through this lens of drone warfare. Russia using mass, low-cost attacks, Ukraine innovating with deep strikes, showcasing this new era of precise mass.
And we've presented those different, sometimes conflicting perspectives found within the source material regarding international dynamics, particularly the role and perception of U.S. leadership and aid and how that seemed to impact the conflict, reporting those views neutrally.
Absolutely. This deep dive into your sources really shows how the situation on the ground is so tightly linked to global political decisions and these rapid technological shifts in warfare.
Yeah, it's all interconnected.
So here's a final thought for you, the listener, to consider drawing directly from the insights in this material we've discussed. Given the increasing accessibility and the proven effectiveness of these low-cost precision strike technologies like the drones used en masse in Ukraine, how vulnerable do you think critical infrastructure and military installations might actually be in other parts of the world now? And what does this new era of precise mass, as the sources call it, really mean for global security and defense strategies going forward? It's a big question the sources implicitly raise for anyone watching this conflict.
A critical question for the future indeed.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.